Welcome everyone to Creating a Family, talk about adoption and foster care. Today we're going to be talking about something really relevant to almost everyone who is listening, surviving being cooped up with your kids during the coronavirus isolation. We are getting a lot of emails and social media messages and posts from foster parents and those who've adopted kids who've experienced early life trauma. We have also been getting emails and social media messages and posts from just all types of parents. So we're going to do this a little different. We're going to address some of the specific concerns of foster and parents who have adopted older kids or kids who've experienced early life trauma. And we're going to do that at the first part. And then the rest will be for all parents. However, I suspect that all parents, regardless of whether their kiddos have experienced early life trauma, will benefit from the first part because we're going to be sharing tips that are going to help all families. So without further ado, let me just say I am so happy to have with us today one of my favorites, Carol Lozier. Carol is a licensed clinical social worker with over 25 years experience counseling children and families. She specializes in adoption and foster care issues, and she is the author of one of the books I always recommend. It's truly one of my favorites, and it's the Adoptive and Foster Parent Guide. She also has a new book that will be coming out within the next couple of weeks called DBT Therapy and Activity Ideas for Working with Kids and Caregivers. And that's basically aiming for kids between the ages of 6 and 12. And what that is coping skills for parents. So we're going to talk more at the end about those, about the books, because I'm really excited to hear about the new one. But without further ado, let me say welcome, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
During this strange time, we are all living in self-isolation, no school, and for many of us working at home or being out of work, we are not surprisingly, we are getting a lot of questions from parents on how to survive and how to cope with challenging behaviors. So we're hearing a lot about families, Carol, who are struggling with acting out, but also we see some kids whose behaviors are improving. And some of the reasons we know that children are acting out is there has been a disruption in their schedule, in their routine, no school, parents at home, just everything feels and quite frankly is different. And let's be honest, parental stress. We know that parents are stressed, and that's not only foster parents, but also their biological family. Their birth family is also stressed. And then there's just kind of this general anxiety in the air about health, about they're worrying about their parents and their siblings who may or may not be living with them. They're also wondering and worrying about when things are going to return to normal. Aren't we all, right? And honestly, especially with foster children, there is very often a disruption in the visitation with their birth family or birth siblings. So for all of these reasons, we know that kiddos are struggling, and oftentimes children are struggling, they act out. But we're also seeing some kids, quite frankly, who are doing better. Why is that?
hmm Yeah, I've been really surprised. I think what I've come to after talking to so many parents is that kids are doing better because they don't have the stress of school and the stress of navigating those peer relationships, and also because they're home with their family. And
Mhm.
most of the kids that I work with seem to really be doing pretty well. The
Mhm.
teenagers are having a hard time because they want
Yeah.
to be out with their friends, but the youngers are really overall doing pretty well.
hmm and I think, and we're hearing from, of course, I think we're probably drawing from the audience who is, they're reaching out to us because they are struggling. So we're hearing probably from more of those who are struggling right now.
Sure.
Um, let's give some general tips for parents right now during this time that are, and I know when I say easy to implement that I can almost feel the eyes rolling. So let me just say relatively easy to implement. They're doable and things that every parent should be thinking about right now to help them get through this period that we honestly don't know how long it will last. So the first
Right.
one I wanted to talk to you about is routine. How important is routine?
I mean, I think it's super important for parents and for kids.
hmm
And, it doesn't have to be quite as tightly scheduled as what we're all used to, but having a general structure to the day is extremely helpful for everyone.
Hmm. I agree. Kids need to be able to predict what's going to happen in their day.
Hmm.
And let me just throw out that if your child is particularly struggling with this, consider either writing it down if they're able to read or creating a visual picture chart. Stick it to your refrigerator. It does not have to be Pinterest worthy,
Hmm.
and just so that the child knows where to go. All right. Our second tip is to give you and your child a break. Give ourselves a little grace. Let's talk briefly about that.
Right. Well, I mean, anytime we run into difficulties in life, it's important to give ourselves a break and our children. And so, knowing that this is a tough time for everyone, keeping that in mind, keeping that grace in mind.
Yeah, and I will throw out, and we'll talk about this more in the second half of the show, but relaxing expectations on schoolwork. People are getting just very stressed out about that, and I think that's the first place to cut yourself some slack.
Definitely.
Yeah. The third tip is to find an activity or a project that you are interested in, maybe really interested in, and that your kids can get interested in. Some examples would be cooking, gardening, planning your next vacation,
Hmm.
photography, I don't know, learning about African animals or something that you actually are birds of prey or whatever that you
Sure.
have an interest in, and get your kids involved. So why would that be important right now? Why would we add that as one of our top 5 tips?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think every day. So my busy practice hasn't changed much other than I'm completely online. Um, so every day this week, I've heard from different families how they're all cooking together, and the
Mhm.
kids love it. The two things they first want to tell me when I see them online is they want to introduce me to their pet, and they want to tell me what they're making or what they have made with somebody in the family.
Uh-huh. Yeah. It's a way of connecting. It's a way of passing
Mhm.
the time. It's a way of having something to look forward to.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they love
exactly.
it.
Mhm. Um, our fourth tip is to get outside whenever possible, a couple of times a day. I think we don't even need to explain that. And we also, you and I have discussed, we realize that that is somewhat dependent on where you live, but
Sure.
almost everyone is able to get outside, and the benefit of fresh air and sunshine cannot be overstated.
Mhm.
And our last of our top 5 tips is going to be on scheduling a quiet time every day where every family member is alone and quiet.
Mhm.
So let's talk a little about that.
Sure. Well, of course, as a therapist, the thing that I would encourage too is during that quiet time, it'd be great if everybody kept a journal and wrote about how they're feeling. And, even for the real littles who can't write yet, they can draw pictures about their feelings because we want to look for lots of healthy opportunities to get kids' feelings out. Because what we know is if kids aren't finding a way to express their feelings, they're going to show it in behavior.
Hmm. Hmm. And for a lot of parents too, they're using this time to either work, to be honest, because they're trying to work from home,
Right.
or to recharge. Just the constant demands, especially if you're not used to being with your
Mhm.
kids 24/7. The constant demand of being on can really. We're hearing from so many people who say, "I'm just worn out.
Right.
My
Right.
kid talks all the time, or whatever. I need a break, and it's hard to get
Yeah.
a break right now."
Yeah, it really is. And I think on top of that, I know for myself and talking to lots of other therapists, we're all used to doing our jobs with people, not online. And so now that we've all switched to online, and I'm sure this is true for everyone, online's more exhausting.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah, it really is.
Totally. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you're not used to trying. It's hard. You're
Yep.
trying to you're even when you're online working, you're also multitasking. We all know that that's not terribly effective, for one,
Right.
and number two, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
So, for all those reasons, and that
Mhm.
ties into our earlier one, which is give yourself a break, and a
Right.
little grace, during this time.
Yep.
All right. So now I want to ask you, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. All right. We polled our audience and found out the top 4 behaviors that they are finding the most annoying, shall we say, right
Mm,
now with their kids. So if you could pull from your wonderful bag of tricks of two or three, however many you want,
mhm,
ideas that families could implement this week right now to deal
mhm.
with these 4 things. And the first one, I'm sure, is going to be a total shock to you. Tantrums.
No, not the shock.
I know that was a shocker. So, all right, what would you suggest?
You know, my first suggestion is that if your kiddo's prone to tantrums anyway, sort of piggyback on what one way you already mentioned, and that is outside time, and not just outside time, but active time. Kids who have a lot of energy or high emotion need to find some physical ways to get that emotion out. So go outside, go on a walk. And if you don't feel like you can walk in your neighborhood, go outside and in your backyard, make a little mini obstacle course, you know, um,
Good
jump through the
idea.
hula hoop, put out some string and, tiptoe on that, you know, then put out a jump rope and you got to jump rope 5 times. Then over on this spot, you do 10 jumping jacks. Over here, you do 3 burpees. Like be super creative and come up with a little obstacle course for your kiddo to do. But twice a day, 20 minutes of exercise is going to be super helpful.
And I would throw in also you do it. Even if you don't do it very well or even thoroughly, kids love it when adults
Yes.
participate. And to be perfectly honest, you could probably also use a stress reduction.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
okay. Anything else for tantrums?
I would say the other thing is to do maybe a reward chart. Reward charts are so much more effective than consequences and discipline. So, you can break it up to a whole day or half a day. So from breakfast to lunchtime and then lunchtime to dinner, or the whole day. If the kiddo is able to go that day without or that period of time without having a tantrum, then they earn a little sticker. And at the end of the 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, if they have enough stickers, they can earn a reward. And, for these times, like, let's keep it to something they don't get to usually do that they'd love to do, like play a board game of their
Mhm.
choice or do an art activity that you've put off forever because it's so messy. Um, allow them to choose something that's a relationship based thing because that's what we've got right now.
Okay. All right. Not necessarily the second most common problem, but one that we're hearing. It's one of our top 4, and that is sibling arguments,
Mhm.
fighting, grumbling, sibling issues. All
Right.
right. Thoughts on that one?
I think the first and most important thing is if kids are at home a lot during the day, which we probably are right now, there's going to be more time to squabble over things. So,
Hmm.
one thing would be to sort of structure time, meaning, okay, we're only going to watch TV during this times, or we're only going to have iPad during these times. And so, really kind of forcing them somewhat to do other activities like do a puzzle, draw pictures, read a book. Let's get them involved in activities and that aren't so much activities that they're competing for. The other thing is make sure for parents, make sure that you're not inadvertently choosing sides. So if there's, even if you feel like that one, probably the one creating the problem, if there's difficulties, then, both kiddos need to go to their room for a little bit. And again, you can use that behavior chart there too. Hey, if we've got, you know, days or periods of time where you're using your words to solve problems, right? And so we always want to use the way we explain things and what we want them to do versus what we don't want, right? Because then you're kind of letting them know, hey, this is what you need to do. So if they're using problems using their word, or they're solving problems using their words, great. They get kudos for that. They get little stickers on their chart. And if they have enough of those stickers, then they also earn a token or award or a little coupon that says, hey, you get 30 minutes of mom's time alone,
Okay.
something like that.
And I would throw out that also another tip we already gave was one of our top 5, and that is alone time. Kids need time away from each other just as much as we need time away from them. So that
Yeah.
can also help. All right. Another of the top 4 biggies, arguing over screen time. Good help. I cannot wait to hear what you say. Please help me out here.
Yeah. Well, I think some people aren't gonna like what I say.
Uh-oh, I might be one of them. Okay, go ahead.
So what we know is that screen time needs to be limited, and that's even during this, and I know that's so hard for parents because they're at home working,
Yes.
and it's I mean, I get it. It's really hard. Um, so let's say we give them a little extra screen time than we normally do. What we know is that 45 minutes every day after homework when we're in typical life mode,
Mhm.
and then an hour each day on the weekend. So if we double that time, an hour and a half during the week, and then maybe up to 2 hours each day on the weekend, but no more than that.
And choose wisely. If you are working from home,
Yeah,
then choose screen time to coincide with when you need to be getting some work done. Or if
right.
you know you're stressed to the max, I mean, for me personally, the hours between 5 and 6 are really just not my highlight. They just are not. They are times
Mhm,
where I'm tired, and that's a good time for me to think of screen time because honestly,
right,
there's no really high quality parenting going on in my house at that point.
sure.
Different people, different times, but nonetheless. All
Yeah. Oh,
right.
and let me just add, I
Sure.
guess when I'm talking about screen time, I'm talking mostly about video games. Like, if the family wants to sit down in the evening and watch a movie together, I'm not really counting that.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, good. Oh, thank goodness. Okay. All right. I'm feeling a little better about myself. All
Yeah,
right. And their last of our top four is the need for constant parental attention, the inability to do anything by themselves or to work by themselves, constantly having and demanding or seeking our attention.
sure. Yeah. So I think, what we have to figure out is what's the motivation for that? Is that because they're feeling anxious? Is that because they're having a difficult time coming up with an idea? Like, or is it just kind of goes back to they have a really short attention span? Which thing is it? If it's
Mhm.
an issue that the child's feeling anxious and you keep saying, okay, go do this, go do that, do this next, you're sort of missing what they're needing. So we want to check in and make sure, is it an anxiety issue? So if it's an anxiety about what's going on, that needs to be addressed, and ask them, hey, how are you feeling? What's going on? How can I help you with your feelings? What can I do to help you feel better? Um, if it's boredom, one of the things you could do is get a paper and just list a bunch of things that they can do. One of the things I know I saw one parent did was she had index cards and with different colors wrote different activities that the child could do so that visually when the child looked at the different um, activity cards, they could see different things. Just making the word a different color sometimes is helpful to kids. Sometimes if they
Mhm.
look at something and they've got sensory issues, they don't really see the differences there. So they're only in their little mind, they're only seeing one thing. Or for littles, of course, you would draw pictures with
Mhm.
different colors. And short attention span is short attention span. And so, um, that's not anything that we're going to immediately change. And so that's where that physical activity is so important. So when kids, are a little more on the hyperactivity end with short attention span, impulsivity, they really need that 20 minutes twice a day of physical
Mhm.
activity.
Mhm. Mhm. And if it's raining outside, do your obstacle course inside.
In the
They're
basement.
they're
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, outdoor is good, but if you can't get outdoors, indoors. I would like to let you guys know about the underwriter of this show. That is the Jockey Being Family Foundation. Their mission is to strengthen adoptive families through post adoption services, which, as you can imagine, speaks to the essence of my heart and what we do here at Creating a Family. And one way they support adoptive families is through their free backpack program, which provides newly adopted children with their own backpack, personalized with their initials and filled with a Jockey Being Family cute stuffed bear and a blanket. And there's also a tote bag for parents, and it has resources that are really useful for your post adoption journey. So, if you are a newly adopted family or you know of one, please ask your agency to join the Jockey Being Family Backpack Program. You can do it by going to their website, jockeybeingfamily.com, and just click on Backpack. So, although those children who have experienced early life trauma are struggling, we know that all kids are struggling. It's a disquieting time, to put it mildly. And quite frankly, kids pick up on our own stress, and most of us are stressed to some degree or another. I wanted, Carol, to talk with you about the how do we talk to children about the virus without overly dumping adult concerns on them, but on the other hand, they know something is going on. And I know it depends on the age of a child. So let me just give you some age ranges and get your thoughts on how to explain what's happening. Let's start with kids under the age of 6.
Kids under the age of 6.
Hmm.
Um, I would imagine kids under the age of 6 aren't gonna know a whole lot unless they're hearing stuff on the news. Of course, they will know that life is different right
Well, they're
now.
not in school. Yeah, I mean,
Right,
they're
right,
not going to school, so they know that, and
right,
they're hearing things from older siblings, and they're not allowed to go outside, and they can't hug grandma, so they
right,
know
right,
something's going on.
right, right. And, eh, to the same degree, they're not gonna understand nearly as much as the older kids. So I think, we want to explain to them in childlike language that right now that, um, you know, using the words you typically use with your kiddo. So maybe you typically say, when people are sick with the flu, or you might say they have a bug or they have the flu, you want to stick with the words you usually use and explain to them that right now there's lots of people getting sick and we all want to do our part to help not give that cold or that sickness or whatever the word is you use to other people. And so we're all going to do our part and help out and stay home. And I would also then let them know that's why right now, mommy or daddy is asking them to wash their hands and use their hand sanitizer, because we want to all be a team and work together, and so that we can make the illness go away.
Okay, so keep it simple, and
Yes.
this is what we're here, okay, so now what about older kids? Let's say elementary school age kids, up
Right.
through first through 5th grade.
Yeah. So again, you want to stick with the language you usually use with the kids. And again, try to keep news to a minimum. We want the kids to be aware, but we don't want to produce unnecessary anxiety for them. And so it's a balance of um, helping them understand the situation without creating the anxiety. And so again, you want to use the language you typically do for, illnesses or the flu or a bug, or, and explain to them that right now there's a new illness and that scientists and super smart people are working hard to figure out medicine to help people who get sick, and also immunizations to help people avoid getting sick in the first place. And of course, even with the immunizations, that also depends on the family, because some families don't believe in immunizations. Um, and that we're all working hard to be a team. The whole United States and the whole world is working together, and that each of us are going to do our part. And so in your family, you're going to describe to your kiddos what that means. What does that look like? Well, that means only daddy's going to go to the grocery, or right now, mommy's working from home, or that's why we're washing our hands a lot, and that's why we're not going out with friends. And so, we're explaining to them what the plan is. Kids need to know when there's a problem what the plan is and how we're going to work on solving it, because that also helps reduce the anxiety.
Okay, so the plan, and this is why, we're not having sleepovers, we're not having play dates, and so we give them the idea, the reason behind it, and we set up a plan. That might be a good time to talk about how we're going to structure our day.
Mhm,
Yeah. All right.
mhm.
Now we can move to tweens and teens, our middle schoolers and our high schoolers, and if you want to divide those uh, because of their maturity level, then do.
Right, right. I think they're similar in that, you know, with the tweens, I still wouldn't let them have much access to news. Whereas the teenagers, depending on the maturity of that teenager, you might let them watch a little bit to be informed, but not a lot. And still, talking to them about what the problem is, why it's a problem in the world right now. That again, emphasizing that, there's extremely intelligent people all over the world working on this so that we can solve it, and how important it is in every family in the whole United States and in the whole world to do our part. And so our family's going to pitch in and help do our part, and this is what we're going to do. This is what our plan is as a family, and this is how we're going to help to make things better.
I do think with high schoolers, you have to assume that they're hearing more than you think they are.
Yes.
If they've got a phone, they're hearing it all. So don't underestimate that, and make you a source of information. If they have heard something, have them come to you and ask questions and be open to admitting what you don't know, but also trying to get information for them. Because I certainly know that high schoolers in my life um, are up and getting the same rumors that adults are
Yeah.
getting. Yeah,
And
exactly.
yes. And I want to add to the important thing for every age child is to let them know if they're feeling worried or anxious or have any questions to come to you, to let you know and to ask, and that you will answer as honestly and as you know clearly as you can, and that you're there to help them, that you're one of the people that's whoever the parents are in the family, that we are here to help you. And so if
Mhm,
you're feeling upset, come to us.
mhm. Okay, we got a question from Bethany. She said, "We we made what I now see is a mistake of letting our rules and expectations go for the first couple of days that we were all at home. My husband and I were just trying to figure out how to work from home, buy enough food, find toilet paper." And she says, "We were almost out. We were not hoarding," and coming to terms with what all this means. So we kind of let the kids fend for themselves and do what they
Yeah,
want.
yeah,
Now they are resisting our efforts to establish a routine and meet our expectations. They are 9 and 11, and right now I really don't like them very much.
sure. I
So
love her
she says,
honesty.
"Help, what do I do? How do I get back in control?"
Right, right. I love her honesty.
Yeah, me too. I did.
Um,
I appreciated it.
yes. So, I love when parents make mistakes, because it's a great opportunity to show kids how do you manage a mistake. Because let's face it, we all make them. And so, what I would suggest is for her to go back to the kids and have a family meeting with her spouse, and to say to the kids, "Oh, wow, I made a mistake. When this first came out, I was overwhelmed. We were overwhelmed. We didn't know how long it was going to be. We weren't sure how to handle it. And so now we as a family need to regroup and come up with new rules. And I'm super sorry I made that mistake. Sometimes those things happen. So let's talk about what our new plan's going to be, and then we can move forward."
And at ages 9 and 11, involving them in coming up with the plan too, which may mean a little more, there may be some giving on your part, but allowing them to be involved with the plan because they're old enough, I think.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we talked about the importance of alone time, quiet time, but we didn't get into the specifics of how you find. I mean, how do you do alone time? Let's say you've got three kids, and you're at home, and perhaps your spouse is at home. So, do you have some ideas, just kind of some practical brainstorming ideas of how people can enforce alone time? And while you think, let me just say, I'll begin because I am a big believer in. Regardless, I mean, not just because of the coronavirus isolation, but for other times, perhaps it's because I'm enough of an introvert that I desperately need it. So one of the things is to pick a time of day that for us it's after lunch because people are already a little, lunch kind of makes you a little more on the sleepy side, and people are usually satiated and relatively content at that point. So picking a time and having it worked into your schedule with the expectations that this is what we do during this time and that everybody does it. We all are going to be by ourselves. So that's one thing. Now,
Hmm.
what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, and I also want to mention, single parents out there, because I know most of the time when my kiddos were growing up, I was a single mom. And so you don't have the tag team, especially. I know for me, my parents were in immense help. But, during the coronavirus, people can't maybe rely
Yes.
on grandparents or other people to help them because we're all at home. So I would say what we want to do is everybody has a certain time, and again, this can be discussed as a family or just the parents decide, but everyone decides on what's the time going to be for alone time. And we spend that time either in a particular spot or in their own bedroom. If everybody doesn't have their own bedroom, then it would need to be particular spots in the
Mhm.
house.
Mhm.
And, for little kids, that might be, or those who have a difficulty with attention span, that might be a little bit difficult. And so, what we want to do is try to work on shaping their behavior. And so, what that means is, let's say that we know that kiddo can do 10 minutes alone. So, what we're going to do is start with that 10 minutes and then work toward 15, right? Once they've been able to stay alone for 15 minutes, then we work toward, 17 or 18 or 19 minutes. And so, with the end of that time, once they've been able to, have that alone time for the allotted amount, then I would say it's a great idea for everybody to come to the kitchen and have a snack, because that's that positive reinforcement of being able to maintain that time.
Mhm. Great idea about having a snack or something fun, going out, snack, and then going outside afterwards.
Mhm.
A trick that I use that worked so well is go through your kids' toys and craft activities and things such as that. Select a few, or not more than a few, select those that they can do by themselves and that they really like, and remove them from the general toy circulation. And those toys are set aside and can only be played with during alone time. And this is assuming that a child is not napping. So they can only be played with during that time. And at the end of the alone time, the toys get packed back up and put up on, for us, it was an upper shelf on a closet. I have a friend who put things on top of a refrigerator. She lived in an apartment. So wherever it was put away and they did not come down again. And then if we continue to be isolated for a while, then to rotate those toys. And if anybody wants to, if you have extra money, buying something special that's only used during this time, and it has to be something that the kids can do by themselves and they don't need help with. So that's a tried and true trick as well. All right. Something that a lot of parents are really struggling with right now is how to work at home when you have kids. In the for most, well, for all of us, because even if you work at home and your job is normally from home, you don't have kids around because it's impossible to work from home with children. Or without having coming up with a very specific plan. So, any thoughts on how to balance working from home with also having children in the house?
Right. Yeah, it's not an easy thing, is it? Um, I think one of the things we want to look forward to is other ideas that maybe we haven't used in the past that are now available to us. Like, for example, there's lots of online things that really weren't even available before the coronavirus. For example, the Cincinnati Zoo does a daily, um, I forgot what it's called, but they bring out different animals each
Hmm.
day and introduce the animal to the children watching. So I believe it's at 3 o'clock every day. I think it's on Facebook, where they do basically a virtual be at the zoo. Um,
Hmm.
there's also online that are free art classes for kids, dance classes. Right now, I know Amazon Books is offering free books for, like, I think 3 months. So use some of the other things that are out there right now to keep the kiddos occupied a little bit, um, during the time that you have to work. And I mean, the bottom line is, I think for some, this is going to be a challenging time.
Hmm.
And so, can you put extra breaks in your day, to also take care of yourself?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's self care. It cannot be overstated. It's also cannot be overstated how difficult it is when you're
So
uh,
difficult.
doing everything.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Some of the tips people are using and have shared in our community is getting up earlier, which means going to bed earlier. So going to bed when the kids are going to bed, even though that's not your normal routine, and getting up earlier so that you have uninterrupted time in the morning. Time after dinner if it's urgent and that's not exclusively family time. If you do have a partner, doing trade offs and having saying specific, defining specific times that are traded off. All right, you'll have from 9 to 10 in the morning, and I'm going to have from 1 to 2, and you're going to be the parent in charge, and I am not going to be doing, and so the kids can't come to me and or whatever. So being very defined with it, so it's not just amorphous. You need to help out more. Being very specific with your expectations. Those are all tips that have been stressed in our with our group that seems to be working. Um, One of the main stressors, and we will be doing a show next week talking about this, and it's on homeschooling or schooling your children during this time. But I wanted to bring it up now as well. That seems to be stressing a lot of people out. The feeling that have become their child's main educator, and number one, they're not trained for that. Number one, number two, just the stress of it's got to be me. I've got to. If I don't do this well, my kid's going to get behind, just all of that. How do we deal with that anxiety?
Mhm. I know one of the things I'm talking to the families that I work with a lot is, if possible, and it also depends on the child's learning abilities. Some kids really, right now, this is a really big struggle for them. And so, what I've been talking to families about is modifying the schoolwork. Um, and so, for example, if they have, you know, a math paper and they're supposed to do 10 problems, asking the teacher or the regular school teacher if it's okay to do all the evens or all the odds instead of all 10. Um, you know, lessening the load, because
Mhm.
honestly, the child's emotional health and the family's emotional stability is a lot more important right now.
If we go back to one of our top 5 tips, cut yourself some slack. This is a
Mhm.
great area to cut yourself some slack. I think it is. We just the world, our children's entire future is not dependent on what we are able to do right now. Whether your kid goes to Harvard is not going to be dependent on what you do during this period of time. And teaching your kids is not it's not should not be your major source of stressor. Let me remind everybody that this show, as well as all the resources provided by Creating a Family, and keep in mind we do have tons of resources on our website, creatingafamily.org. We have resource pages for both foster and adoption. And under that, just about any question, any topic you've ever wondered about, we have all sorts of resources free for you to go to. So, all of those resources would not happen without the generous support of agencies who believe in our mission of providing post and pre and post adoption support and care and training for families. And these are agencies that are putting their money where their mouth is. They not only believe it in theory, they actually believe in it enough to support it. One of those wonderful agencies is Finch Chapin. They are a licensed, accredited nonprofit organization in the New York City metro area that has been offering adoption services for more than 100 years. Their robust post adoption services provide all members of the adoption triad, birth parents, adoptive parents, and adoptees, a supportive community and a connection to professionals who really understand some of the unique aspects of adoption. And we have Hopscotch Adoptions. They are a Hague accredited international adoption agency, placing children from Armenia, Bulgaria, Croatia, Georgia, Ghana, Guyana, Morocco, Pakistan, Serbia, Ukraine, and Ukraine. And they specialize in placement of children with Down syndrome and other special needs. They also are a go-to place for international kinship adoptions. And we thank both of them for their support. All right, here is a question we got from Debbie. She said, my kindergartner is so focused on all the things he isn't getting to do. He's incredibly social, and this lack of friends is killing him. Today would have been his class field trip to the zoo. Tomorrow would be his school fun run fundraiser. He won an award last year for the most laps and is very upset that he can't do it again this year. His birthday party was canceled and he didn't get to be star of the week. The list of things he cries over, and I do mean literal tears, is overwhelming. He won't be returning to that school in the fall, so he's also upset that he didn't really get to say goodbye to his friends. He didn't get to have his kindergarten graduation. So, how do you help kids cope with all of these losses? And let me add that I would add in there that although Debbie's son is in kindergarten, I know there are a lot of older kids and teens that are especially missing their school graduations and all the experiences that go with that event. So let's talk about helping our kids cope with the losses associated with all this coronavirus isolation.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's affected so many important days, for the kids and for us. And yeah, it's a huge loss. So I think, the first thing that you always want to think about whenever your kiddo is sharing their feelings with you is to validate them, right? Whether you agree or not with what they're saying, you want to find that piece of truth in what they're telling you and validate them, saying, I understand why this is hard for you. Gosh, yeah, it sounds like this is so upsetting. Let them know that you hear what they're saying and that you understand where they're coming from. So I think the other thing is, again, it's an opportunity to show the child how to handle adversity. And so how we guide them through this is so important. So for example, I guess one of the thoughts that first comes to me is to explain to the kiddos, this is hard. It's hard for all of us, that validation. And then saying, how can we spend this time to create some memories together? And, I think the other thing that really comes to me is, I'm aging myself, but kind of thinking about some of the things we did before video games, like coloring together, making doodles together, telling a story together. Like one person starts the story and the next person, adds to it, and the next person adds to it, and the next person adds to it until the story ends. Another thing is, remember that riddle, I see something you don't see, and then you describe it and people have to guess what it is.
Mhm.
Doing that. Really thinking outside the box here. What are things that possibly could entertain us as a family and that are different, that maybe, pull from your own past? What's something I used to enjoy doing as a kid that really my kids haven't experienced because of all the technology? And not to, I mean, thank goodness for the technology, because I don't know where we'd be today if it weren't for it. But, another thing is there's an online Jeopardy game that you can make yourself. So the kids could even make it and then everybody could play it. I think it's called jeopardylads.com, I believe is where it is.
Okay. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, so let's focus on one of the things that we know is that our tweens and our teens, in addition to suffering like the rest of us, that is a time in their lives when they are more friend focused and they're defining themselves oftentimes through their friendships, and these relationships are taking on greater importance in their lives. So, how can we help them cope with being isolated from their friends?
Yeah, I'm hearing about it a lot.
Yeah. And
I
and the counter off part of that, not only being isolated from their friends, but being stuck at home with their parents.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. I have a DBT group for teens, and they were all talking about it this past week. Um, I think they're all, really, I've heard some of them say, I'm surprised. I really am enjoying doing some of the things with my family. And they're talking about board games and going on hikes and making things together. And so they're doing more of that, which they are enjoying. And, again, thank goodness for technology, because they're able to see their friends on, Facebook or they don't really do Facebook, but they can, FaceTime friends, or they
FaceTime, yeah.
can,
Mhm.
I mean, they are staying connected with their friends, and it's extremely important for them.
We have heard of a family that was, they have a very strict screen policy, and they were forbidding their children to FaceTime. Uh, and and not to be critical, but that just feels that they were their teens, and it just feels that that maybe now is not the time to. Well, let me ask: would you count FaceTiming as screen time?
I think that, again, we don't want kids constantly on their screens, right? We
Right,
want them
we don't.
interacting and doing other things. And so, um, again, and we also want to think about life in balance. So, if that's how they want to spend some of their time connecting with friends and they'd rather do that than video games, I think that's fine.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I agree. Right now is a time when it is important for kids to be able to connect, especially the teens, with other teens. And so I think allowing that grace of, okay, I know we usually don't let you FaceTime, but for right now, as long as you use our computer in our bedroom, if that's what you want to do, that's fine.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's we're keeping it reasonable. Now, do you count in your mind if screen time is educational? The Cincinnati Zoo, or there's the doodling, and there are so many online things that kids can do now. Uh, Going back to the idea of balance, as well as it seems like we have two competing things. One, we want to be balanced, but we want to give ourselves grace. So, how do
Mm,
we how do you count the educational things that we do
right.
online?
So people who study the brain and how electronics affects the brain may not agree with me, and so I'm just putting that little disclaimer out there. But I would say that does not count. If your kiddos are watching the Cincinnati Zoo and they're describing the animals and showing the animals, that to me would not be considered part of their screen time. That to me would be considered educational, and especially with what's going on in our world today, all the limitations that we have, that to me would be an okay thing.
One thing I would say though is make certain that if let's say you're set up a schedule and the time you're going to say from 9 to 10 we're doing something educational, broadly defined as educational. I wouldn't make all your education screen time, because if for no other reason, you need to keep the entertainment value of screen time as much as you can, especially for your times when you're just kind of fed up and you need it, or you've got a conference call scheduled and you don't need to be interrupted or whatever.
Mhm,
So keeping balance and in so that not everything you do that is considered educational in for that period of time in your day is all screen time.
mhm.
But it sounds like relaxing and our rules a bit to allow for it, just to give ourselves a break, if for no other reason.
Absolutely.
All right. So now I want to circle back to tips. Um, Now we started the show with the 5 top tips, and I'm going to circle back to mention them again just briefly. Um, and Carol, stop me if there's some things that you specifically want to say, but then I'm going to open it up for some more general tips that you might have. So our
Mhm,
first tip was to establish a routine for your day, and if you've got a child who struggles with that, to make it in writing or with pictures or something. Um, we keep coming back to the second tip, and that is give yourself and your kids a break. Relax some of your expectations, especially as it relates to schoolwork. Uh, Number three, find something that you and if you're partnered, your spouse or your partner is interested in or wants to do, and that the kids would get involved with, and use this as an opportunity as a family to grow and learn something. Um, Number four, get outside when possible and try to do something active for 20 minutes twice a day with your children. And the fifth one that we've talked quite a bit about is scheduling a quiet time every day that for every family member, and kids separated from each other as well. So, Carol, any other tips for helping that you've seen families do that is helping them during this time?
Well, I think, probably the most important thing is just keeping the body balanced, because if we're not eating well or,
Good point.
healthy foods, and we're not, making sure to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, a couple snacks in there, and this is true for us and the kids, or if we're not sleeping well, then those 2 things really make it difficult for the emotions to stay in balance. So, healthy food, balanced meals, sleep. If we're not able to do those things, it makes things very difficult. And I think the other thing is, if anybody in the family is taking medicine, whether it's, psychotropic psychiatric medicine or health medicine, making sure that we stay on track with that. Because I know, if you miss, like if someone's on an antidepressant and they miss a couple days of that, oh my goodness, that can cause all kinds of trouble.
Yeah, and now's not a time where you need that additional stress of being, off balance with your medications
Hmm.
or your kids' medications for the either for that
Right.
matter at
Hmm.
all. Yeah, I'm really glad and I'm very thankful that you mentioned sleep. I almost hesitated when I said earlier about, getting up early in the morning, because now is not a time for many reasons, to say nothing of your physical health, but also your emotional health, to be getting behind on sleep. But it may mean that you don't binge watch at night so that you can schedule a time so that you can set your alarm earlier and have some uninterrupted time to work or to just do something on your own. But yeah, sleep is so important. Yeah.
Hmm.
How about how to help our family members who we can't be in contact with? I know a lot of families are not going to visit grandparents because they don't want to expose their older relatives. Thoughts on how
Hmm.
that impacts both the parents in the family, the grandparents in the family, as well as the children or the grandchildren.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I know from personal experience. I mean, my granddaughter is almost 2, and my daughter and son-in-law and my granddaughter live out of town. So we've already been in the habit of FaceTiming every night. But for those who are used to being in person, yeah, it's super hard.
Mhm.
So taking advantage of the fact that we do have online ability to FaceTime with people, um, and even if you haven't done it before, go ahead and take that leap and try to figure it out. And if you don't know how to do it, see if the loved one that you want to be in contact can do it. I know I have FaceTimed my mom and dad. They're here in town with me, but my mom has autoimmune, and so nobody's going over. And so I have FaceTime with them more in the last week than I probably ever have.
Yeah.
um, and I know last night my sister and my daughter and my son, we were all on a FaceTime together.
Mhm.
Make sure that you're reaching out to people.
Mhm.
Um, you know, it's important to feel connected.
And a suggestion that is particularly, I think, useful for single parents, although it could be used for anyone, is to ask your parents if they would be willing to, uh, the grandparents, FaceTime alone with the child, and that's a way of giving you a break too. Um,
Absolutely, great idea.
and tell
Hmm.
the children that, you've got to be sitting still and FaceTiming with grandma, and as long as you're, behaving and doing that, you get to talk with her and ask grandma to be thinking of some ideas some of the games you mentioned,
Right.
anything that, and use that as especially if you're, well, even regardless of whether your parents have been your support network in
Hmm.
the past, but they could start being it now. And I think it'd be
Sure.
helpful for everyone. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think,
And I just, yeah, and I want to add, I know even when you FaceTime, there's all kinds of things that, like, for example, that grandparents could do with the kiddos. For example, they could have the same book and take turns reading,
oh, nice idea. Yeah.
or they could play a checkers game or a chess game, or, there are all kinds of things that you can do through FaceTime that you can also do in person. So, again, be creative and think about, okay, what could we do that I love to do with my grandchild or my, niece, or my child that's a foster child with my neighbors that I really love that child, stay connected to people.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's something that you could ask your parent to choose a chapter book, depending on this is obviously depending on the age of a child or
Hmm.
children. But the Gary Paulson, the oh gosh, the Far North, the any of those books, or the Narnia series, or oh gosh, there's so many. Little House on the Prairie, and every night read a chapter through FaceTime, can
Mhm.
show the pictures, and the parents can use that time to be fixing dinner or cleaning up or
Mhm.
reading their own book or catching up on emails or something, so that you're spreading out the parenting, the grandparenting. I love that idea. Yeah, it's a great one. I may adopt that one myself somehow. Figure out how. I've got to think on that one. All right. Okay. Now, we have been talking today with Carol Lozier. Carol is the author of one of my favorite books, The Adoptive and Foster Parent Guide. And I think one of the reasons I love that book so much is that it doesn't feel overwhelming to me. I feel like it's written in a way that you can pick it up and gather really useful information from it. Tell me a little about the difference. Now, I don't know anything about your DBT activity ideas for working with kids and caregivers. I know
Mhm.
nothing about that one. So I want to recommend one of your books, but which should I recommend to our audience?
Right, right.
Which of the two? Well, or three. I think you have another one out there.
Yeah. I think it just depends on where the family is in their journey. If it's a family that's new to adoption, then they need to read about adoption and become more familiar with the different issues and concerns that happen for kiddos who have a trauma history. If you're not new to adoption, or have already read the book or other lots of other adoption books, like, go ahead and read the new book, the DBT activity ideas for working with kids and caregivers, because it gives you hands-on tools to work with your child, and also some ideas about handling behavior for yourself in working with your child.
And don't you have a DBT book for teens as well? I'm not sure, but I think
Yes.
okay. So if
Mhm.
you've
I
got
did.
teens, she has another book but the new one that's getting ready to come out is for our elementary school age kiddos.
Mhm.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Carol Lozier, for being with us today. This is a time where we really needed your wisdom, and thank you so much for sharing with us how we can cope and survive, and maybe even thrive during this time, as long as we stay healthy. So, everybody, wash your hands, social distance, and thank you so much for being with us today, Carol.
Oh, thank you.
And everybody, I will see you next week. We'll be talking about schooling your kids during this time. So join us then.